Hello ladies and gentlemen, you're watching NDTV and I'm Vasudha Venugopal. Today on The Last Word, we do a deep dive into China's propaganda network. Delhi police is probing the last instance of China's hand in influencing media organizations to peddle its anti-India propaganda. We are talking about the Newsclick case. A day after searches at the Newsclick office and questioning of journalists associated with the news portal, Delhi police took Prabir Purkayastha, founder of Newsclick, and Amit Chakraborty, HR head of the organization, into custody on Wednesday. Both of them have been arrested under anti-terror law, which is the UAPA. The portal has denied all allegations of any connections with China. Newsclick has also said that all funding received by the portal has been reached through appropriate banking channels. So let's look at the alleged money trail between China and US millionaire Neville Singham, who has emerged as a big player in this story. According to agencies, all of this begins with a company set up by Jason Fetcher, an associate of Neville Singham. The company, Worldwide Media Holdings, was incorporated in the US in 2017. In 2018, the company allegedly pumped in rupees 9.6 crore of FDI into Newsclick by buying shares of the portal at inflated rates. Newsclick has also allegedly received export remittance of 28 crore between 2018 and 2022 from two US-based entities. During investigation, Newsclick could not produce any proof for exporting services to the US companies. This is what agencies have said. Of course, Newsclick has denied these allegations. So the agencies have also claimed that money from Chinese Communist Party was routed to Neville Singham through Newsclick. Singham has allegedly paid at least rupees 38 crore to the portal. Some other individuals, such as Gautam Navlakha, an accused in the Bhima Koregaon case, has allegedly been paid rupees 21 lakh by Newsclick. Others, such as Teesta Setalvad and her family members, journalists such as Paranjoy Guha Thakurta, Urmilesh and Abhisar Sharma, have also received payments from Newsclick. Many of these journalists, however, have come out and clarified that they were just consultants with the portal. Earlier this year, however, an NYT investigation implicated Newsclick as one of the organizations funded by a network associated with the US millionaire Neville Singham, an allegation that the news portal has denied. Now, who is this Neville Singham who has emerged as an important player in this whole story? Agencies have identified Singham as the individual responsible for funding and sponsoring Chinese propaganda through non-profit groups and shell companies. Singham operated out of China. He is also a long-time activist who founded the software consultancy firm ThoughtWorks based in Chicago. Delhi police has said that Singham used this financial network to push China's propaganda. Now, Newsclick is not the first crackdown on alleged China-funded ventures by Indian investigating agencies. Until last year, the central government banned over 250 Chinese apps, citing them to be harmful for the integrity of the country. Meanwhile, a report by the Freedom House American Institute has said that China's propaganda network has been found in every major country. This was found after a study of 30 big countries that said that China has a propaganda network in more than 15 countries. Now, this report also noted a tremendous increase in propaganda in the last 3 years in 18 countries spread across America, Asia, Africa, South America, and other nations. Remember, major social networks like Facebook are banned in China. There are also activities such as hacking, trolling, and other kinds of harassment techniques that are also deployed. Now, this brings us to the big questions that we ask tonight. What is the magnitude of Chinese propaganda in India, how serious it is, and what are the ways in which China has been trying to influence global opinion? And how serious is this problem? How serious is this problem? That is an important question. Is there also a need for bolder positioning by India to counter such propaganda? To discuss this, we have a panel of esteemed guests with us. Mr. Harsh Pant, who is the advisor for policy affairs, ORF, who is also the vice president, and Mr. Subrata Saha, who is the former deputy chief of army staff. Mr. Pant, I'd like to go to you first, sir. When we talk about Chinese propaganda, what exactly do you mean and what forms does it take?
The communist parties traditionally have been very good at propaganda, at influencing open societies where there is always a space for freedom of expression, dissent, and therefore the media and the academia, the think tanks, it's an open space, and that is how it should be. But the communist parties traditionally have been using this as a vulnerability, for all kinds of activities that ultimately go against the very grain of an open exchange of ideas, because what they eventually end up doing is using their economic heft, their propaganda machines, their media apparatus to shape a narrative which very subtly starts demonstrating the superiority of perhaps, or the right fullness of what the communist regimes have done, and thereby undermining the open societies and democracies in particular. So I think what the Chinese have been very good at is to use their economic statecraft, is to use their economic heft, technology heft, increasing technology heft, to therefore penetrate our open societies, democracies, and thereby shape the narrative in their favor. And I think in some ways, this information warfare is even more insidious and dangerous than the kind of challenge we face along the border, because it means that the society from within is getting vulnerable and is getting exposed, which can have very dangerous repercussions for a society like India and for open democracies.
So Professor Pant, also tell us, I was reading some reports and they talk about how the nature of Chinese propaganda has changed over the years because it's become more sophisticated now. So when I look at a site, I don't see many articles that are pro-China. So how does this propaganda work then?
Well, it works, in a way now that it is not about glorifying China in your face propaganda that old communist regimes used to do. Now it is about challenging the societies from within in terms of exposing the other societies' vulnerabilities, and thereby indirectly saying that, look, we are superior to you. For a long time, China was making this argument that, look, that Western democracies are weak, they can't make decisions, their economies are collapsing, and look at us. We are now the new role model. We are doing so well now. Our data speaks for itself. Now it is another matter that a lot of data, that data is manipulated. It is another matter that a lot of the time state and the private sector work in collusion. We have also seen technology firms increasingly now, which are at the vanguard of this activity, increasingly working in tandem with the Communist Party. So therefore now, because China has greater resources, China has greater technological heft, China is able to do it much more subtly than it was before. And therefore, we have to be extra cautious in terms of what we are consuming as news, as information. And in particular, I think our media should be very careful where they are getting that information from and how they are deploying that.
Okay, so let me go to Dr. Saha now. Dr. Saha, how serious do you think the problem of Chinese propaganda is? And do you remember any past instances of China influencing journalists in India?
You see, this business of propaganda as an element of warfare, okay, and when I say warfare, it's in a broader context. It does not necessarily mean, firing of rounds. It is pre-hostilities, pre-hostilities, hostilities and post-hostilities. So propaganda is nothing new, okay? And China's indulgence in propaganda is also nothing new. We have heard in the past, from in the good old days when leaflets used to be thrown, over the population, over the front lines to try and influence the minds of the people who are fighting, or for that matter, minds of the population of the nation, primarily to break the will of the nation, break the will of the people in undertaking what they are undertaking. So therefore, it is serious. There is no doubt, number one. Second thing is we have to see the multiple intersections that we are witnessing now. And I think the most important intersection that we should be talking about is the intersection of technology in this entire, gamut of activities that we are noticing. For the last 4 to 5 years, China has been repeatedly harping on civil-military fusion to develop national capabilities, national military capabilities, national offensive capabilities. They have been talking about it in their white papers of defense and multiple other such forums. What is this civil military fusion? Ultimately, what we are witnessing, this trying to influence minds in India, trying to influence minds outside of India about India. It is all part of a much larger game that they are doing. And why are we seeing an intensification in all this? One, clearly because China is not at all comfortable at the fact that India's improving relationship with the United States and several other countries in the West, Australia, Japan, and so on, South Korea. So therefore, this China finds to be quite unnerving, quite disturbing. So if you see, for example, post the G20, the kind of messaging which was coming out from Global Times.
Right.
Okay. Now, Global Times, as we all know, is the mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist Party. It is the mouthpiece of the PLA and so on. And it is the same, narrative which is being pushed through multiple other means. Because if it comes out only for Global Times, from Global Times, one would, clearly take it with a pinch of salt. But if it is coming through other means, through subtle means, obviously we are seeing that happening. And why am I talking about technology? Because quite clearly this AI, is being used very, very effectively in this entire business of propaganda that we are witnessing now, and we'll see more of it. And
Right.
now imagine, this kind of propaganda juxtaposed with cyber warfare. I mean, it is a very, very deadly and very potent mix that we are facing. So therefore, it is important that, and I'm glad that you have chosen on this point to pick it up, irrespective of what outcomes will come out of the police investigation, irrespective of what outcomes will come out of the various intelligence agencies who are looking into it. But the fact of the matter is, exactly as you point out, is it serious? Yes, it certainly is serious, because quite clearly there is a very, longish network, very wide network, which is connected to all that we are witnessing now, from here to the US, from US through multiple, other sort of links, ultimately getting back into China. So this
Right.
is definitely, I mean, in many ways, one, we are talking about directly with China. In many ways, if you see what's happening in Canada, for example, I mean, after all, there is somebody who is, there are some forces that are find it very unsettling to see India's growth, whether it is in the economic field, whether it is in the diplomatic field, whether it is in the military field. And from military point of view, if you see the number of joint military exercises that we are carrying out, literally every other day, we are starting some joint military exercise or the other. On the one side, we are having the Indo-Pacific Army Chiefs Conclave. Within a day of that, we were participating in Alaska with the US military. Only yesterday, another joint military exercise has started. Just a few months, less than a month before that, we had Malabar. So it's all this is, unnerving, unsettling. So therefore, how do you deal with it? Because till such time as the hostilities break out, so this information war, which is in a sense the new avatar of propaganda war, is what we are seeing, coming into play.
So, Professor Pant, before I come to you, let me remind our viewers that all the journalists, most journalists who have been questioned by Delhi police yesterday have clarified that they were just consultants with the portal. And Newsclick also has issued a very strong statement rebutting the allegations. Professor Pant, now tell me, before Newsclick also we have seen that the Indian government did clamp down on Chinese apps and, Chinese-led gaming platforms. So what is the magnitude of this kind of penetration? We also keep hearing of these hacking activities happening. So what are the areas that India needs to be concerned about?
See, I think General Saha was pointing out a range of issues, whether it is cyber or whether it is information warfare. All of them are now, we are looking at this as a whole. But, this is a challenge that you see in the entire, as I was saying at the beginning, in the entire democratic space, if you will. Because what is happening is that, even some things that one used to take for granted, like academic exchanges, even they seem to have been weaponized in a very strange manner, right? We used to have Confucius institutes that were opened at one point across the world by China to disseminate Chinese culture seems to have become places of Chinese propaganda in ways that were not visualized or anticipated when they were allowed to be set up. So a large part of the world is reassessing today their relationship with China, and a large part of that reassessment is based on what is happening at the information warfare level, at the level of information exchange, where somehow this information exchange is becoming asymmetric in nature, where China in some ways can project its own narrative in ways which is very difficult to push back against, especially by the democratic world. And that is what I think in some ways resonates with what Xi Jinping said at the very a few years back, that he asked Chinese institutions that China's narrative should become the world story. So in some ways, basically articulating the need for China's narrative to be so dominant that any other country trying to push back against it not only finds it difficult, but also finds it difficult in terms of institutions that are out there to push that back. And I think in some ways, media, because that's the easiest route through which consumers consume information, through which information is exchanged on a daily basis, that is in some ways easiest to pollute, if you will. And so this particular case notwithstanding, we have seen a range of issues across the world where all sorts of allegations have come to the fore, and all kinds of governments have looked at their own relationships as to how media is regulated and what sort of a relationship media should have with the information being fed by the Chinese side, because that's information that is being fed in a particular way. And therefore, we as an open democracy, as a liberal democracy, should be very careful when we are assessing and using that information that is coming to us from Chinese sources and the way it is being projected by the Indian media here in India. And I think, therefore, this debate, this particular episode has ignited, perhaps should lead to some concrete outcomes where, as you were articulating earlier, India will have to go on the offensive in terms of also positioning its own narrative vis-a-vis China, that this is not simply a one-way street. India will have to do much more alongside all the institutions available with it.
Right. Professor Pant, so specifically, I know you touched upon this, but specifically in the context of our neighborhood and given the nature of India-China relationship in the last few years, and also India's increasing engagement with the world, like, we have this massive infra project coming up in the Middle East. So how important is it for India to act sharply on these matters, and does it also become more precarious for other factors like, journalists and other entities to sort of show caution? What do you think about that?
See, it's very simple. We have seen India, China contesting across the world. They are competing on a range of issues. It's no secret. In the neighborhood, that contestation is sharpening because you have constituencies in every country and where China has influence, and that influence is reflected in various ways. So I think for India, therefore, it is very important to have its narrative in place, because what the Chinese have been able to do in the last few years is to make India as the villain in a range of episodes. So, for example, before Sri Lankan crisis erupted, the way it erupted in Sri Lanka, and the way we now know China has also played a part in the eruption of that crisis. But if you see before that crisis, it was India being painted as the villain, that India is a country that has a big brother attitude. India, Chinese media, along with some regional media, continues to propagate that narrative. We have also seen that happening. For example, Chinese ambassador in Nepal openly proclaiming that, look, India doesn't care about Nepal, and which is very undiplomatic, not only undiplomatic, but a kind of a wolf warrior diplomacy that China has been very keen on showcasing. And now some of that had rebounded on China. But for India, the challenge is that India has to put out there its own narrative, its own ideas, which are not simply about pushing Chinese narrative back, but they are also about India, which is a rising power in its own right, trying to tell its own story. That, look, India is also a country that is now working with like-minded partners, with like-minded countries to generate global public goods, which I think in some ways, whether you talk of the recently articulated India-Middle East Economic Corridor, or you talk of major other activities that India has been undertaking in the region and beyond, that narrative should come out much more strikingly.
Right. So, General Sahab, a recent report by the US Department of State reveals that, China is investing heavily in constructing a global information ecosystem to push its narratives. And Professor Pant was also talking about this. How is the Chinese information warfare different from those of, say, US or Russia?
Okay, I think first and foremost, I think which India is already putting in, and definitely it requires a very, very strong and concerted effort, is cyber warfare. To my mind, that is topmost priority because cyber is the most potent threat which we are facing literally on a daily basis. And a lot of it, we don't even probably come to know how it is coming and affecting us on a day-to-day basis. Like, for example, what you are doing through your channel, how vulnerable you are, how threatened you are. If it applies to you as a channel, it applies to you also as an individual. If you're constantly being fed with a certain kind of narrative, your mind gets influenced, okay? And so now from cyber warfare, we are coming straight into the domain of information warfare because really speaking now, these two are almost inextricably linked. Now to support, whether it is cyber warfare, whether it is information warfare, to support it, most important is you need the technology. To support it, you need the funding for it, and you need the skilled manpower for it. Today, as we see, China definitely is on top of the list in virtually all of this. Very recently, Australia had published a study on cutting edge technologies to do with defense or rather national security. If you see in most of the subfields, there were almost 30 plus fields that they had considered. Clearly, China was going ahead or is going ahead of the US. So therefore, I think definitely it has to be a matter of concern for us because there is no doubt that we are a frontline state with China locked almost, in an eyeball to eyeball confrontation now for the last is going to be almost what? Going to be 3 years, 3.5 years now that we are in this kind of a disposition with them. So therefore, it is of concern. And quite recently, we have been hearing reports about some surveillance ship from China wanting to dock in Sri Lanka and so on. And we've had these elections in Maldives. There is no doubt that the party that has been elected, the president that has been elected on a pro-China and sort of Islamist kind of a leaning. So obviously, the influence operations of China are very much at play because that is one of the many places that we see this contest which is going on. So it is not only along the land borders or the line of actual control. We are seeing it spreading out all over the Indian Ocean region. I mean, literally speaking, we are seeing this sort of aggressiveness, whether it is in terms of the economic coercion that the People's Republic of China is doing against Australia, Taiwan, we are seeing, and the military coercion that it has been attempting to do against India. In all of it, we are seeing, the things unfolding. So therefore, yes, cyber we have to be very, very focused on. Information warfare we have to be very focused on, and the money trails we have to be very, very mindful of to see from where our funding coming. Even in this case, going by what the media reports are saying, you see the interesting funding channels, like a share which is virtually at, I think, 10 rupees or so gets multiplied so much under the garb of foreign direct investment. And this I'm quoting straight from the media. I do not know what the ultimate outcome of the agency reports are going to be. But certainly you see, on the one side, we want foreign direct investments to come in. On the other side, we have to deal with the threats that are associated with such investment. So I think it's almost every element of national power is under contest now, and it has to be a very strong whole of nation approach to deal with the threats that the country faces, and because it is determined now to hit the $5 trillion economy mark, because it is determined now to become a developed nation by 2047. So therefore, interests that are adversarial to us, we have to be conscious of them.
Thank you, General Saha and Professor Pant for joining us. So those were some expert voices on the concerns surrounding Chinese propaganda and the changing nature of it and the need for India to get its narrative right. Well, that's all the time we have for you in The Last Word. Thank you for watching NDTV. Stay tuned for more news and updates.